What did you guys think of the penultimate episode?
I really enjoyed it. I think it was really cool to get answers to some of the questions we had with Wanda's backstory in general. I think it was nice that I feel like we've but this whole series, and particularly this episode, feels like we've got the Wanda film that we never got before. Like we're getting all the answers to these things. It's giving you a different perspective on certain movies. I really enjoyed this episode, even though it was kind of just going back through everything. I feel like we got some really interesting answers to the questions that we had.
I agree with you, and particularly what you said about it felt like she's like a mainline film character.
Yes.
I feel like what this episode did a really good job of showing is not just from what we've discussed in weeks previously, in the sense of like as a lore figure, she's very interesting to the Marvel Universe. Obviously, she's Magneto's father and all that sort of stuff. But as a character that has gone on a journey this week, I think that actually proved that ever since Age of Ultron, she's had the chops to lead an MCU movie.
Yeah.
And I think it also shows to me that all of the supporting characters in the background that have been fun, we've liked them, but they've not had the same sort of like meat to their storylines as someone, say, like Cap or Tony. I think we're going to show... this episode has proven that they're going to step up. Do you know what I mean? Like Falcon Winter Soldier, I'm way more excited for after watching this episode, because they've clearly proven they can take a character like Wanda, who was originally a support, and give her enough texture to be like a mainline character. So
100%.
I'm excited. And for Loki as well.
Definitely.
Absolutely. I thought that, like, setting the storyline aside, because we're going to talk about that a lot, I just want to say that the whole episode was a masterclass in acting. Like, Catherine Hahn was fantastic. Elizabeth Olsen, again, was fantastic. And I just think it was a really, really great episode. Yeah. I had a little tear. I had a little tear when her house wasn't built. That was sad.
It was great to go back through, like, previous moments in the MCU and sort of fill in detail to, like, not only her relationship with Vision, but also that crucial scene that she describes in Age of Ultron where she's talking about the Stark missile that came into their house, and they prayed for days and waited, hoping it wouldn't go off. And now to hear Catherine Hahn say, oh, that was probably a probability hex. Very interesting. Because not only does it say that she had powers before the Mind Stone, but it also begs the question, where did she get the powers from?
Yes.
So I feel like we're moments away from
dun, dun.
dun 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 dun. Please. Well, maybe not quite that. I know. I think they'll confirm.
A man could dream, Matthew.
I mean, we're awaiting our Luke Skywalker-esque cameo, aren't we? So
we are. I don't think it's gonna be Magneto now.
Yeah, I think it's more likely to be Reed Richards.
I think so, particularly because of something we heard this episode with Pietro, as Agatha Harkness called him, fake Pietro.
Yes, that is true.
She mentions, doesn't she, that she sort of like summoned him or created him.
And she couldn't bring the other one because he was dead with holes in him.
Although
which is interesting.
Kevin Feige said this week, didn't he, that he sort of implied that he's made up and not from the X-Men universe as well in an interview. And I sort of feel like it's weird and out of character for Kevin Feige to not get this right. Because I feel like the thing that has always really helped the Marvel universe is that he is actually a fan. He knows what people want and what crucially, he knows the balance between giving you fan service and actually challenging the stories and doing something a bit surprising. And I think if we end up with a Pietro this season that was played by Evan Peters, it just turned out to be a bit of a misdirect, I think that's colossally disappointing. And also, like, what was the point?
And a big tease.
A massive tease.
Yeah.
Naughty boy.
Because Feige knows that at the end of episode 5 or whenever Quicksilver was revealed, that we would have all been going, the X-Men universe is going to fold in with the Foxmen, with the MCU, the Foxmen are going
to... The Foxmen, that's great. That's great.
But now, maybe that won't happen?
Yeah, it just feels like it's kind of like, oh, here's some fun just to jerk yourselves off to, but we're not going to make it part of the story.
Yeah, here's a meta tease, like, oh, you know Evan Peters played Quicksilver in that other franchise.
Yeah.
But I'd be shocked if that's what Feige's going for.
Yeah, that would be really disappointing, I think.
I think
a lot of people would feel that way.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, yeah, she was controlling Pietro, but he's not a fake Pietro. He's just a Pietro from another universe. Do you know what I mean? That's like the revelation Wanda has. Like, oh, like, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm still not unconvinced we're going to get the scene at the end with Doctor Strange assembling his team, you know, as I detailed in the last episode.
Yes. I mean, I guess that would kind of makes sense in terms of, you know, this is the next era of the MCU. You know, it's the first time they've gone to TV. The first time they set up the original MCU. We had Nick Fury at the end of these things, creating his team. Is that you know, is this what we're going to get now? Doctor Strange,
His
you know,
multiverse team.
with Reed Richards and Bully Maguire.
Fantastic. I mean, there's definitely going to be some sort of lead into Doctor Strange 2, isn't there? Because even when at the start, like I really like the way that even though Scarlet Witch is really powerful, Agatha Harkness has found ways to trap her. For example, when she's like describing that she's got runes in the room.
Yeah.
Yes.
And because of those runes, she can't use her powers. And she's like, oh, well, how do you not know this like basic stuff? Because she's fought for all this time, and we've thought she has basically like telekinesis and mind manipulation, all this sort of stuff.
From the Mind Stone.
Yeah, and it's almost always been implied as science-based, doesn't it? Even though they imply it's like magical. Whereas now they're actually sort of going the full hog and going, oh, you've got like probability powers, chaos magic, like and even the fact that Catherine Hahn says you don't know anything about them says to me that she's going to go to Doctor Strange and be like, teach me, in the same way that he did to Tilda Swinton.
Do you think that's fascinating? That, you know, the MCU, I feel like when they first started out was so like shying away from like anything magical. Everything had to have like a scientific sort of explanation, like particularly with like Thor, he's an alien and things like that. And where it's now, because we've seen so much over the years, like crazy stuff like Thanos and all these, it's almost like they've relaxed on that now, and they're like, let's just go all out. Let's just give them the magical powers. People are more accepting of it now because we've established this over a 10-year period.
Yeah. I think Thor was the linchpin for all of that.
Yeah.
Not only just because it obviously introduced Thor and all those fantastical characters, but the way in which it sort of described the world as like, oh, well, any kind of magic that you don't understand, any kind of science that you don't understand is magic, isn't it?
Yes.
I think it's an Arthur C. Clarke quote they paraphrase in the movie.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, even in the second one, when she's talking about like that magical force field that's like healing her in Asgard, she's like, oh, it's some sort of energy field, and like one of the Asgardians is like, oh, it's one of these, and she's like, well, it's one of these, like, so like, you know, they go out of their way in the Thor movies to explain how all of this stuff really is just science, and how, you know, Thor and the Asgardians are really just another alien race, aren't they? Which is still fantastical, but it's something, you know, we buy into a bit more, don't we? We like to think there's other life out there.
And then you just cut to Thor Ragnarok where they're just like, nope.
Yeah,
don't explain it, just have fun.
But we can do that, can't we?
Exactly.
Like, we never have to know why Tony Stark isn't baffled by the fact that wizards exists when he is a hard scientist.
Definitely.
But then he's seen a lot of shit. He's seen a lot of shit as Tony Stark, so I don't think anything would shock him anymore.
Yeah, there was a really good quote from Jon Favreau when the first movie came out about whether or not they would include the Mandarin, and he said that you couldn't buy in A New Hope the Emperor shooting lightning out his fingers, but you can buy it in Return of the Jedi.
That's very true.
Yeah, because by that point, we've seen Force Ghosts, we've seen all these other kinds of powers. So by the time we get to the Emperor, the big cheese, we're expecting something fresh. Whereas he was sort of using that analogy to describe, like, by Iron Man 1, the thing you've got to get people to believe is that you can create these fantastical suits and fly around in them. It's another thing entirely to suggest there's, like, a powerful mystical element. And it's taken films and you know, a generation really to get to where we are now, where we've got like the scientist Hayward element with like, you know, reanimating a robotic body mixed in with, you know, we've got like Massachusetts in the 1600s with a witch trial in the same episode,
which was an incredible scene, by the way. The
way
really they all like latched their powers onto her, and then like she was like turning them purple and like holding them.
Yeah,
they couldn't let go.
But she was like holding them via the beams that they were shooting out, weren't they? So it was really cool to see them sort of like, you could tell they were trying to like get out of it, and they were just getting stuck. Also, I really liked the production design for like
when they were dead,
when they were dead, because like they weren't quite skulls, and they weren't quite like, you know, like the Indiana Jones like the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant. Yeah. It wasn't like that where they're like melting. It was kind of like somewhere in between, wasn't it? You could still see their eyes.
It's like
really
sort of like
horrible.
the life was sort of sucked out of them.
Yeah, it was like they'd been dehydrated.
Yeah, they kind of look like the zombies in the Walking Dead later seasons, where the zombies are a bit dehydrated and their kind of faces are kind of sucked in a bit more.
Well, that's my dinger to remind me to not watch The Walking Dead. Because it's shit.
Yeah, and I also think that I really enjoy... this is something I wanted to ask you, actually, just a little question for you guys. How do you guys feel about the sort of Agnes implying or saying that Scarlet Witch is almost like a bit of a mythical figure? That this is like a...
Oh, at the very end?
This is something that's, you know... And I know... I'm intrigued to see what you think about this, because I know you're not a big fan of that sort of thing, where it's like... It's
like almost a prophecy
type thing. So
I see what you mean. Yeah. I don't mind it so much when it's a character that has explicitly come from nothing, has never expected themselves to be anything.
Yes, that's a good point.
In the same way that, you know, I think Ryan Johnson really explains quite eloquently, like Luke in the original trilogy, to bring up another Star Wars reference, another Star Wars director, Luke, the one thing that Luke wants is to be this homegrown farm boy hero that defeats the evil Empire and defeats the evil Vader. And the hardest thing for him to learn is, oh no, actually, I'm part of this great chain and I'm actually born great and I'm born of this dynasty that actually isn't great, and it turns out that Vader screwed everything up, and, you know, what's the cost of that, and do the sins of the father affect me? For Rey to learn that she's a part of something is exactly what she wants. So you need to give her the opposite. That's why you make her a nobody. So here, I think it's, you know, it's that same example again, isn't it? It's the Scarlet Witch, or Wanda, has, you know, grown up poor. She's lost time and time and time again. She has no reason to believe that she is special, even because of her powers. So now to have this chucked to her and say, like, oh, the witch has always been coming for you. And I really love that scene where they went back to, like, the
Mind Stone and the facility.
Yeah, and you saw her look into the Mind Stone and see the visage of the Scarlet Witch, like, descending down upon her. That felt really horror, because it felt less like she is the Scarlet Witch and more like this being is possessing her, or it's like coming for her.
Yes.
It was cool.
It's definitely because she was kind of dressed like she was in a possession movie. In that, she looked like she was in The Exorcist or something.
She looked like she's the girl from The Ring. Like.
Yeah, which I imagine was kind of intentional, especially with that whole bit when, you know, she sees almost the prophecy coming towards her.
Yes, definitely.
Like you said, like a kind of a possession, almost like it went inside her and has possessed her in a weird way.
I have a question for you guys.
Okay.
Do you think, given what we've now been shown in this episode, that Vision is going to survive WandaVision? I think he is going to survive. I was on the fence. I want him to survive for reasons I've explained previously. But I didn't think he was, because of how much we were leaning into sort of like, you need to accept loss, you need to accept this pain. But then at the same time, I think you can buy resurrection very rarely when the character has lost so much that they need that moment where they get that catharsis. And I think Wanda has lost time and time again.
Yeah.
She's had death following her like a shadow, and I think it's time for her to get this one miracle, and that is her husband comes back to life. And he's not like a human being, is he? It's not like a standard resurrection. He's a robot that could take the consciousness from himself in Westview, which we have now revealed that Wanda created. Hayward very cleverly played that video to our main characters to make it look like she'd stormed in and stolen the body, when in fact the thing that Hayward has been tracking this whole time appears to be Vision's actual mind.
Yes.
And I think what he's going to try and do, or what maybe the character's going to try and do to keep Vision alive, is merge him with that white Vision body.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
I'm really annoyed because I was going to say that, and I haven't spoken yet. So
well,
thanks,
it's
Matt.
the Full Fat Podcast for a reason, right?
Talk more, Terry. Takes Terry's points.